Okay, so quick little reflection. So last year, as you guys obviously know, there was a lot of traveling, a lot of all over the place. I mean, I did two Ironmans. I did a 101 kilometer race. I swam across the Lake Garda in Italy, traveled to Korea, Japan, to Iceland to shoot the campaign, to Africa to teach at a school, to Paris to do the show, to New York to host a pop up and a dinner and an after party in Miami, host a pop up and in Paris to host a dinner and after party and like everything. So this was all in like the span of like 3 months. And obviously, that can seem like it's a bit like all over the place. And I think what I essentially want to communicate with this YouTube series is that, when you're creating a fashion brand, it's not just about, like doing a sketch, uh, making a sketch in the studio, and that's how you create fashion. I think for me, it's much more like a reflection of like my personal interests and like these personal things that I come across. And the idea with this YouTube series is obviously to give an insight into what do those things look like, because I mean, you can obviously study fashion design and fashion management and like all of those things, but in the end, I don't think that that's what's gonna make your brand special. I think that's something that's gonna come directly from you and your experiences. And I think this is sort of like my way of giving a glimpse into those experiences. It's making a lot of noise. Perfect. But basically, I think what I'm trying to say is that, in the old days, how you would invent new things or create new things would be to travel around the world and bring back like inspiration, bring back things that like would be new to your place, and that's how you created new things. So I mean, I guess what I'm trying to do as well is to basically go around the world, get as inspired as possible, meet inspirational people, meet potential new collaborators, like bunch of like see a bunch of new things, and based on that create something that I feel is interesting, and can potentially like inspire uh, other people, and I think good things come when you mix things that are unexpected, and new. One of the best pizzas that I had in my life was in Tokyo, and it was like a bluefin tuna pizza. And before you say anything, I had this with an Italian person. I'm not going to name any names, but even he was very impressed with that pizza. So just goes to show that, yeah, like you can get amazing experiences all over the world, um, unexpected things that can come to you, and that can basically be translated in a way for your audience to experience something new. So obviously these pizza makers in Tokyo, they went to Italy, they got inspired, and they went back and they created inspiration, or like an inspired product. They took the base of something that they saw or learned somewhere else, and then they took their traditions of creating bluefin tuna, like raw bluefin tuna, and then they combined those two products and they created the most amazing tasting pizza, or like at least one of the most amazing tasting pizzas in the world. And I think this is a perfect example of like going out into the world and bringing back um, things that you've learned, inspirations, and making something new for your platform. And essentially that's what we're trying to do with Heliot Emil, is creating this platform where inspiration can flourish, or where innovations they can be shown. So learning from people that we meet, things that we see, experiences that we have, and taking all of those and then putting that into a product or an inspiration or an experience, and hopefully that resonates with people, that they also want to explore more and open their eyes to what's out there, what's possible, and be, I guess, like part of this journey of exploration. I think the last thing that I want to be is like stuck in a, like doing the same thing over and over again, or potentially like being yourself, trying to come up with the next thing and not utilizing the connections that you potentially can make all around the world. I don't know, it's a lot of rambling. I just thought that, like, it seems like this YouTube series is a bit all over the place and a lot of things that are happening, but basically what we're trying to communicate is that this is exactly what it takes to create something new, is going around the world, exploring different things, and then coming back and putting that into a vessel, putting that into something. So I guess the point of the YouTube series is to show you that glimpse behind the scenes of what it takes to create a fashion brand in the contemporary era. I mean, Japan taught me a lot about discipline, I think. Not in the way of like working, but more in the sense of like the mindset of discipline. It seems like there's this like unspoken respect for craftsmanship and for like getting really good at something. They really practice very hard, or they really get nitty gritty with like all the details. Almost like there's like a, like meditative respect for perfection. Every detail is like thought about. No matter what you do your best to get like really good at that. And I think that sort of like in Japan reflects this thing that everything is considered. Also like the minimalism there. It's not just like an aesthetic, it's more like a lifestyle, or like it's a reflection. You see like Uniqlo or Muji, or like these brands that are super minimal. It's like that's just what their lifestyle is like built around. It's like a philosophy. Like I think that also resonates a lot with HE, or like this idea of like stripping away the unnecessary. So not necessarily the idea of like the aesthetic of minimalism, but more the concept of like stripping away everything that's like unnecessary. And I think that's like super important also in the way that like systems function. Their whole setup of like their subway systems, like very considered. There's like very clear instructions on where to go. There's like color indicators, there's like numbers of where to go, what exit to take, what like every little detail is just like thought about in this process. Like all the conductors, they wear like white gloves in order to indicate that their workspace is like super clean, because like obviously a dirty glove indicates like a dirty system. And I think, like there's a lot of examples of this, but one that I think is very interesting is comes from this documentary called Hero's Dreams of Sushi, and it's basically about this really old guy who has a sushi restaurant in like a subway station in Tokyo, and he's just like perfecting his craft like year after year after year, just like really trying to get better and better and better. And he says like all the employees, they have to spend like a lot of time perfecting just how to make the rice before they even get to touch the fish. I think there's like a lot of examples, but there was also just like a few examples that we noticed when we were there. And also like there's vending machines all over Tokyo, all over I guess like Japan in general. And there was one time that I saw a person who was like filling up these machines, and basically they are behind like there's just like a thing that you press with like the image of the item that you want to get. But even when he was then filling up the machine, he was like making sure that all the cans were aligned. Just, I don't know why, because like nobody can see it anyway. So it's just like, it also a clear indication of how the system runs super deep. So I thought that was like super interesting as well. I think with that obviously also comes like a bit of rigidness. If you ever go to a restaurant and you want to change something on a menu, like don't even think about it, because like they get so confused if you want to take anything out, or if you want to we asked one time for like the sauce on the side, and they were like, yeah, like impossible like it's the most simple thing, but they're just like so clear and rigid in their systems, and they know that those things they work, so they just tend to like that's how they do those things. I think the mindset of this, I think obviously influences how I also approach design. I think when it comes to design and storytelling and what you want to tell, I think it's quite important that you keep it quite strict and you keep it quite clear, what you're trying to communicate, what you're trying to say, so that it doesn't become too many things at the same time, because that's just like gets muddied, and I think people they can see that. I mean obviously with HE we've managed to create like a very clear storytelling in all the years that we've ever done this, and obviously some people are saying it's getting repetitive, but from my side it's more about the consistency, and it's more about like the idea that you're communicating this same message over and over again, just like solidifies your belief in that direction. I think that's like a direct comparison that you can make to the way that we also approach design, and the way that we see how we can sort of like shape the way that we're going. Yeah, I think at HE, like there's always this like meticulous like search for ways to elevate functionality, and I think that's also a similarity that you see in Japan. They're very much based on like everything having like a specific function, and everything having like a clear purpose. That's also why like minimalism, like the way that they see minimalism as very much this like idea that, okay, everything has a place and a function, and if you take that parallel into design, I think it also kind of like reflects the way that we see the design that we're doing, that everything needs to have like a purpose, everything needs to have a function. Not saying that you know, like necessarily have to make functional clothes, like that they have to be only for one intended purpose, but the concept here being that what you add should add something to the piece. So if it's like a specific detail, or if it's a specific fabric or something, it adds something necessary to that piece, and everything that becomes like unnecessary, you try to strip that away. Yeah, and that can be from an aesthetical perspective, or it can be like from a functional perspective as well. And then I guess like another thing is like this idea of always trying to better yourself, always trying to improve the processes that you're going through, see how you can optimize certain things, see how you can make things either like more a sustainable way. I don't think that Japan is like forefront of like sustainability necessarily, but they're definitely, you know, like looking at things from a way of like everything should be as good as it can get and should be the best. And I think that that's like, you know, a very admirable challenge or perspective to keep. Yeah, and then I think lastly, like Japan sort of helped me understand that, like, you know, that God dwells in the details, you know, like you have to really think about all of these details. You have to consider all of these details. You have to look for improvements in every aspect of your work. Try to see as much as possible like what you can improve, how you can improve those things. And even if it's like small details that the majority of people will not care about, the ones that do, for the ones that do, like they know, and they know that your intention with this is like, you know, to improve that product. And I think that's also something that, you know, like it really taught me. The ones that don't notice, they will just appreciate it for the bigger picture of like going into the details. But for the ones that really notice, they know that you're striving for perfection when it comes to like those details. And I think that that's something that I really took away from Japan, is this constant strive for perfection. And yeah, I'm obviously hoping that we can somehow live up to that same mindset as well. A bit of reflection on like the US trips that we've been on. First, Miami, Art Basel. Such a great experience. I mean, Miami is sort of like, it's almost like a comical in a way, like, because the contrasts there are so like so intense. The people that you see, obviously you're surrounded by a lot of like creative people and people from like a bunch of like different industries and stuff, but especially like during Art Basel, that like contrast of the types of people that are there becomes so intense. Like you see the people that are there, like the crypto kings with like the art that they're doing, some you know, like reworked Starbucks logo that says Star or something. It's, you know, like like that Art Basel vibe, and that's sort of like placed next to this Richard Serra piece, or you know, like Mark Rothko, or, you know, these kind of things where it's like the contrast just becomes so deep of like what America represents. So Art Basel is really like this, you know, like a melting point of like
where you can really see the difference in the type of people that go. I mean, and obviously it's super interesting and it's super inspiring to be around like a bunch of ambitious people, because like obviously everyone who's there is ambitious in one way or another, you know. And I think that creates like a bit of, you know, like an interesting perspective, an interesting atmosphere, like this, you know, like this search for more, this hunt for wanting more. Yeah, but I mean, I think all in all, Miami is an interesting place. I think that there is a lot of stuff happening. We were in some stores that said that the whole landscape has changed so much just over the past like 5 years. So I think that it's definitely a place that's developing and growing. Has like a, let's say, a creative scene that's growing much more, and like underground culture that's coming up, and like what you've seen in places like New York and LA mostly in the US is now also coming to Miami, and to, I mean, also to other places like I've heard a lot about like Austin, Texas, that's also a place where things are happening a lot. Yeah, and other like smaller places, smaller, I say, like smaller than LA and New York, that are starting to get a lot of attention. But yeah, then we obviously also went to New York, which is in some way like it'll always be where my heart is. I remember just like falling in love with that place when I was younger, and I think what really got me was this idea or this concept that you can really make it to the top there, or you can really sort of like get your way through, because it's so connected, it's so close. Like you're rubbing shoulders with a lot of like interesting people, and a lot of like ways that you can get to the top are just like very different in New York, I think. And I think that like contrast of the mix of people, like the mix of, say, like all the homeless people with like some of the richest people in the world, like that contrast is just like so dominating in New York. And I think that creates like an interesting tension point. And sometimes I feel like that's also where you find some of that beauty, is by obviously looking at what does the roughness look like, you know? And I feel like New York has this great sort of like polished roughness to it, which I think is rare in other places. Like other places that sort of like grow up with this great ambition and like becoming something bigger, they sort of get rid of all of that roughness in a way, and they sort of clean it up. But it seems like it's kind of like stuck around in New York. And I think that there's something very interesting and inspiring about that I think I'll always sort of like have a little bit of like a soft spot for. So yeah, and I think that's also been taken into my work with Heliot Emil, is like this seeing the beauty in the roughness of things. And I think, yeah, that'll always have like a special place in my heart.
So speaking of innovation, I think one of the destinations in particular made me think about that. So Korea is considered this place of kind of like contrast, because on the one hand it's one of the most advanced countries in the world, but they also have a lot of deep-rooted traditions. So everywhere you look there is kind of like this balance of old and new, both in like design and in architecture, and just like in daily life in the convenience stores and those kind of things. But I was thinking a lot about that and thought, like, how can we think about fashion and technology coming together, like beyond sort of like the shape and form of things? Because at HE we've always been very big fans of pushing the boundaries of exploring technical materials, new ways of thinking, and all of these things. So when I was in Korea, I came across this brand called TEXNIC. And basically it's a company that works with discarded battery separators from cars. They're normally burned for waste, but they take these battery separators and they make them into these high performance textiles that are like waterproof, they're breathable, they're super durable. And I think it's just an amazing way of how you can use technology and implement it into something existing. And together with TEXNIC, we did a Heliot Emil TEXNIC capsule collection for Autumn-Winter 25 that sort of brings this technology and fashion coming together vision to life. And to celebrate the launch of this big collaboration, we did a huge pop-up back in May, right in the heart of Seoul. It was in Hanamdong. Yeah, and it was a huge space, 4 floors, all curated with this experience in mind. But yeah, this is just an example of how we at HE, we were trying to look ahead, experimenting with interesting new materials, with technical innovation, and just like all of the possibilities of like what clothing can do and what fashion can be. And yeah, basically this is a perfect example of that, and kind of like why this project makes so much sense to me.